Somewhere, hidden beneath the weight of centuries, lies a secret that could unravel everything you thought you knew about power, desire, and control. Picture a grand plantation in the Carolina Low Country, the kind of place where wealth was measured not only in acres, but in the bodies forced to tend them. Here, a woman of society, her beauty celebrated in Charleston parlors, faced a fate that terrified every woman of her class: barrenness. In a world where lineage dictated influence, where children were currency for power, she could not bear an heir. And yet, the solution she found was not whispered in prayer. It was planned in shadows, carried out in rooms no one was meant to enter, and enforced by the cruel logic of fear. A child would be born under her name, raised as her own, but the truth, the horrifying truth, would be hidden for 12 long years. The very people meant to nurture and protect him were turned into instruments of deception. This is a story of manipulation, exploitation, and the lengths to which the powerful will go to protect legacy. What you are about to hear is not just history, it is a lesson in control, and it begins with a single choice. A choice that would echo through lives for decades. Catherine Ruttled's mind was a machine of strategy, honed by privilege and sharpened by desperation. She watched the enslaved women in her house not as humans, but as variables, tools to be measured, tested, and deployed. Her attention fell on Delilah, a young woman whose skin was pale enough, whose features could, in the dim light of the parlor, pass for white. Delilah was literate, taught by a previous owner who had been considered dangerously liberal, and she possessed a poise unusual for someone in her position. To Catherine, this made her the perfect instrument. She observed Delilah's health, her cycles, her movements, her moods. Every detail mattered. Then came the plan. Nathaniel, her husband, would father a child with Delilah. But this was not a simple act of lust or convenience. It was a meticulously orchestrated operation. The child would be presented to society as Catherine's own, raised amidst wealth and privilege, while the mother, the very woman who bore him, would remain invisible, her pain hidden, her existence reduced to a secret that could not speak. In the twisted calculus of power, Catherine had assigned value, risk, and reward to every player. No one could refuse. The enslaved would obey, the husband would comply, and the world would never know the truth. It was a design built on fear, secrecy, and the cold, ruthless logic of survival in a society that demanded heirs above all else. By the spring of 1844, Catherine's vision had crystallized into a plan so precise it bordered on surgical. She began with the illusion of vulnerability, feigning mysterious ailments that required privacy and rest. A small cottage was built on the far edge of the plantation, ostensibly for recovery, but, in truth, a fortress of secrecy. Delilah was moved there, under the pretense of assistance, but in reality, she had become the central instrument of Catherine's design. The other house slaves were replaced with younger, more pliable women, chosen for their fear and obedience. Every glance, every whisper, every routine was calculated to maintain control. And then, in a room lined with law books and illuminated by the dim glow of whale oil lamps, Catherine revealed the plan to Nathaniel. She framed it not as moral corruption, but as necessity, a practical solution to a social and economic imperative. He recoiled at first, repulsed by the implications, but slowly, fascination replaced disgust. Catherine's arguments were meticulous. The illusion of pregnancy could be staged, the birth could be controlled, and every person who might suspect would be silenced by fear, loyalty, or social code. By the time dawn broke over the Ashley River, Nathaniel had agreed. The gears were set in motion. Delilah, unwitting yet complicit under duress, had no escape, and the path forward was drenched in secrecy, coercion, and a ruthless logic that spared no conscience. The performance began immediately. Catherine padded her clothing to simulate the swell of pregnancy, moving with the elegance expected of a matron, while Delilah, hidden behind closed doors, carried the true life at the center of this conspiracy. She was confined, watched, and fed a carefully measured diet to nourish the child growing within her, though no one would ever see the results. Nathaniel played his role in silence, 3 nights of grim compliance, reducing intimacy to mechanics, removing any acknowledgement of the human cost. Every servant, every observer, every detail was controlled with meticulous precision. Delilah's isolation was total. She could not speak to her own father, could not leave her room, could not glimpse the world outside the cottage walls. Outside, Catherine moved among Charleston society, displaying her false belly, receiving congratulations, masking the horror beneath practiced smiles. Those who might suspect were powerless, bound by fear, tradition, or dependence on the planter class. And all the while, the plantation's structure of obedience and control extended itself: house slaves, field workers, overseers, each unknowingly complicit in maintaining the illusion. This was not merely a deception. It was a psychological fortress, a system of dominance where knowledge was power and silence was absolute. The child's life, Delilah's body, Nathaniel's complicity, all were subsumed into Catherine's carefully engineered narrative, hidden in plain sight, protected by the unquestioned hierarchies of a society built on domination. The birth came on a storm-laden afternoon, thunder rattling the roof of the secluded cottage like an omen. Delilah labored for 14 excruciating hours, her cries muffled by the roaring sky, each moment a testament to pain stolen and exploited. Catherine paced, monitoring every sound, every movement, her mind calculating the next step with surgical precision. When the baby finally emerged, healthy and crying, Catherine moved with ruthless decisiveness. Delilah's arms were denied the newborn. The child was wrapped and transported immediately to the main house, where a scene of triumph and exhaustion awaited an audience of obedient servants. Nathaniel greeted his son as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, his silence masking any flicker of conscience. Messages were dispatched to Charleston, announcing the arrival of William Nathaniel, Rutled, heir to a prestigious lineage. Outside, the world saw perfection: a flawless infant, a delighted mother, a celebrated father. Inside, the truth was a tightly bound secret, known only to a handful. Delilah's body, drained of life-giving labor and denied its own child, became a tool of the deception she could never speak of. Catherine had engineered not just a birth, but a psychological coup, a triumph of control so absolute that even the natural bonds between mother and child were rewritten by fear, obedience, and social hierarchy. The plantation had become a theater of secrets, and William's life, from this moment forward, would exist entirely within the bounds of lies. William grew in the grand halls of the Rutled estate, a child of privilege, innocence, and carefully constructed lies. Catherine played the perfect mother, attending to his education, clothing him in finery, arranging tutors, and guiding him with the pride expected of Charleston society. Nathaniel, outwardly affectionate, cultivated the boy's confidence, teaching him the management of fields, the conduct of business, and the art of authority. Yet beneath the veneer of normalcy, a different life existed, one parallel and invisible. Delilah, the true mother, was banished to the fields, her hands blistered, her spirit tempered by exhaustion and despair. She watched from a distance as the child she had carried suffered for and birthed thrived under a false parentage. The daily choreography of control was relentless. Catherine observed, compared, scrutinized, ensuring William bore no feature that might betray his true origins. Nathaniel maintained silence, internalizing the secret as though denial could erase reality. And the enslaved community, silent witnesses, absorbed the injustice, understanding the depth of power that wealth and society could exert. Every day reinforced the hierarchy that had created the deception. Delilah's knowledge, her memory, her body were tools in Catherine's meticulous design. William, unaware of the invisible gulf that separated him from the woman who gave him life, thrived. And so, the plantation became a living testament to control. The lies we tell to preserve power, the cruelty we normalize, and the invisible chains that bind those without agency. By the time William neared 12, cracks began to appear in Catherine's meticulously constructed world. The boy, naturally curious and fearless in his youthful confidence, started wandering the edges of the plantation in the early morning before tutors arrived, and the sun scorched the fields. His explorations led him to places he had been warned to avoid: the cooper's shop, the distant quarters, the quiet corners where whispers of truth lingered like shadows. It was there, in the rhythmic hammering and scent of sawdust, that William first sensed something beyond the boundaries of his protected life. Isaac, Delilah's father, worked with hands hardened by decades, his eyes heavy with memories and unspoken pain. When William, oblivious to the weight of his question, asked if Isaac had children, the old man's reaction was subtle but profound, a pause, a tension that froze the air. The answer came measured and guarded, but it planted a seed, a splinter of curiosity in the boy's mind. This tiny fissure in perception, seemingly insignificant, was enough to begin unraveling a carefully maintained illusion. Catherine's control was absolute, yet even absolute control cannot prevent the human mind from noticing, questioning, and connecting dots. And so the first stirrings of awareness, however faint, began to ripple through William's consciousness, setting the stage for truths long hidden to rise from shadow. Curiosity, once planted, has a way of growing beyond our control. One humid afternoon, when Catherine visited neighbors and Nathaniel was away, William's curiosity overcame the strict rules he had been taught. His eyes fell upon Catherine's locked desk, a place deemed sacred and forbidden. Years of observation had taught him the mechanism, and within moments the drawer yielded to his hands. Inside lay the leather-bound journal, ordinary at first glance, yet heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Most entries were mundane, linens, social engagements, expenditures. But as William turned the pages, he stumbled upon a section dated August 1844, a section that made his heart stutter. Anxiety, desperation, and calculation leapt from the script, physicians' failures, treatments endured, and a radical, horrifying solution conceived. Catherine had written of selecting a young house servant, measuring her body and her health, planning a child not for her, but for her own ambition, with Nathaniel's acquiescence. The reality hit him slowly, like a chill crawling along the spine. The son he had always known, the boy raised in privilege and love, was the product of coercion, secrecy, and exploitation. And yet the words contained more than revelation. They were an initiation, a pull down the rabbit hole into a world where power, deceit, and human lives intertwined in ways the uninitiated could scarcely imagine. William now stood at the edge of forbidden knowledge. The revelation did not strike William all at once. It seeped in, layer by layer, like poison in slow motion. He began to notice the invisible walls separating him from the people who had birthed, raised, and labored around him. Delilah's absence from his life, her quiet suffering, the rigid control of Catherine and Nathaniel, all of it now made sense in a way that was terrifying. The plantation, once a world of order and etiquette, revealed itself as a theater of manipulation, a place where human lives were instruments for maintaining appearances and legacy. For Delilah, the consequences were catastrophic. The years she had spent in isolation, the forced labor in the fields, the denial of her own child's love, they were the direct result of a system designed to consolidate power and enforce silence. Every glance from the older slaves carried memory, judgment, and the heavy burden of complicity. And William, young though he was, felt the first stirrings of moral awakening, the dissonance between what he had been taught to revere and the brutal truth of human cost. In this space between knowledge and action, fear and responsibility, the roots of identity began to shift. The boy who had grown up believing himself untouchable now faced the first tremors of a world built on secrets he could neither unsee nor forget. Catherine's vigilance never faltered. Every gesture, every word, every glance of William's was monitored with precision born of fear and calculation. She compared his features constantly to her own, to Nathaniel's, searching for anything that might betray the truth. Her obsession became a cage, one that trapped not just Delilah, not just William, but the entire household. Even Nathaniel, complicit and silent, felt the weight of her scrutiny, the subtle coercion that ensured no cracks appeared in the story. Delilah, meanwhile, labored in the fields under relentless sun, her body a testament to endurance, her heart tethered to a child she could never claim. The older slaves watched in silent horror, understanding the magnitude of the deception, powerless to intervene. And William, increasingly perceptive, began to notice the inconsistencies, the way his mother's stories never fully aligned with reality, the furtive glances exchanged between servants, the peculiar distance in Delilah's eyes. A tension grew, unspoken but pervasive, as if the plantation itself held its breath, waiting for revelation. Fear, secrecy, and hierarchy intertwined so completely that every life was bound by the invisible chains of obedience. And yet, in this suffocating web of control, William's curiosity burned brighter, an ember of awareness that threatened to ignite the carefully maintained illusion. By now, William's curiosity had evolved into quiet investigation. He wondered, observed, and questioned the world around him with the relentless persistence of a mind unwilling to remain blind. The patterns of deception were subtle but unmistakable, Servants' hesitations, Catherine's exaggerated gestures, the way Delilah's gaze always flickered toward him with a restrained, impossible longing. William tested boundaries, asking seemingly innocent questions about the plantation, about the household, about people whose lives intersected with his in ways he could not yet fully articulate. Every answer, every reaction, became a clue in a puzzle that had been constructed to hide a monstrous truth. And as he probed, he discovered what had been deliberately left exposed, tiny inconsistencies that, when pieced together, revealed the breadth of the scheme. Catherine's control was not only psychological, it was structural, embedded into the rhythms of the estate, enforced by silence, fear, and social expectation. Yet no system, however meticulous, is impervious to scrutiny. William began to realize that knowledge itself was power, that the hierarchies around him could be observed, questioned, and, perhaps, challenged. The awareness was intoxicating and terrifying, a revelation that those in power could manipulate lives with impunity, that the lies of a single mind could govern the reality of so many, and that even innocence, once informed, became a dangerous, knowing force. William's mind, once sheltered, was now alive with forbidden understanding. The threads of deception pulled taut around him, and every day he felt the weight of truths no child should bear. The plantation's invisible machinery of control, fear, hierarchy, and secrecy was exposed before him, and he began to see the full scale of the human cost. Delilah's suffering, the silence of the older slaves, the complicity of Nathaniel, the obsessive calculation of Catherine, it all formed a pattern he could not ignore. And now you, watching this, are standing at a threshold of understanding similar to William's. The knowledge of hidden systems, the mechanics of manipulation, the cold logic of power, it is not meant to be comfortable. To truly step into this understanding, you must acknowledge it, claim it, and let it shape your perception. In the comments, write the phrase, "I see the truth twice." Twice, not once. Let it resonate. Let it become a symbol of recognition, of transformation. By doing this, you are marking yourself as someone willing to confront what the powerful hide, to step into the space of awareness that the world tries to suppress. William's journey mirrors your own in this moment, curiosity awakening, questions forming, and the first step towards seeing through lies and illusions that govern lives. With the journal still heavy in his hands, William began to piece together a reality no one had intended for him to witness. Every servant, every corner of the plantation, every ritual of daily life was a carefully arranged performance. Delilah's exile to the fields, her body and knowledge weaponized and then discarded, was part of a pattern repeated countless times across the South, an invisible economy of suffering, secrecy, and obedience. Nathaniel's silence was a form of complicity, the quiet acknowledgement that power required sacrifice, but only when it served the elite. And Catherine, ever vigilant, was both architect and enforcer, her mind a calculating engine that transformed morality into strategy, human lives into instruments of control. William's awareness grew with every observation. The plantation was a microcosm of a world governed not by justice, but by the ruthless preservation of legacy and image. The innocent veneer of wealth and etiquette concealed the mechanisms of dominance, and those who stood outside the machinery could not fathom the depths of its reach. In this realization, William understood a dangerous truth. Knowledge changes everything. To see the hidden patterns, to recognize manipulation and deceit, is to carry a burden. And yet, to ignore it is to become complicit, trapped within the same illusions that enslave others. The line between observer and participant blurred, and William's life, like yours, would never be the same. The years passed, but the weight of deception never lightened. William grew into a young man, tall, confident, and outwardly perfect. His education, demeanor, and skillful command of the plantation, a testament to Catherine's relentless orchestration. Yet beneath the surface, the invisible fractures she had created gnawed at everything she thought she controlled. Delilah remained a ghost in the boy's life. Her presence felt only in fleeting glances, the subtle gestures of her father, Isaac, and the quiet knowledge of those who remembered. The plantation itself became a monument to psychological control. The hierarchy, the fear, the carefully enforced separation, all meticulously maintained. Catherine's obsession never waned. She scrutinized William's features, his habits, the smallest indication that truth might rise to the surface. Nathaniel's complicity had ossified into detachment, a grim acceptance that preserved his legacy at the expense of morality. And William, growing in understanding, began to carry the burden of knowledge. The realization that human life could be manipulated, controlled, and rewritten by those with power. Each lesson, each observation, each interaction reinforced the terrifying clarity of what secrecy, fear, and hierarchy could accomplish. In this crucible of oppression and concealment, the young man stood at the intersection of inherited lies and emerging consciousness, forced to reconcile the world he had been raised to admire with the truths he now knew in his bones. By William's 12th year, the carefully constructed illusion began to show signs of strain. Subtle inconsistencies, the fleeting recognition in Delilah's eyes, whispered warnings from older slaves, the tense silences in the household, formed a lattice of tension that threatened to collapse the world Catherine had built. The boy's questions became sharper, his awareness more acute. He began connecting events, faces, and gestures that had previously gone unnoticed. Catherine's obsession deepened in response, her surveillance tightening, her calculations growing more desperate. Nathaniel, long silent, could only watch as the weight of truth pressed upon their lives, knowing any misstep could unravel everything. Delilah's existence remained a study in endurance, her labor, her isolation, her stolen motherhood a constant reminder of the human cost hidden behind wealth and status. The plantation itself felt the tension, a living organism aware of the truth simmering just beneath the surface. And William, standing at the precipice of adolescence, began to understand the magnitude of the deception, the manipulation of bodies, hearts, and minds for the sake of power, legacy, and appearances. In that awareness, he glimpsed the dark currents of control that ran through every layer of society, a knowledge that would forever alter his understanding of morality, loyalty, and the fragile illusions upon which civilization itself rests. The secret endured, hidden beneath years of obedience, performance, and silence. William, now aware of the truth, carried it like a shadow across the grand halls of the Rutled estate, a constant reminder of the cost of power and the fragility of innocence. Delilah's stolen motherhood, her suffering, and her exile from the life she had been promised left scars not just on her body, but etched into the conscience of everyone who bore witness. Catherine's meticulous control, Nathaniel's quiet complicity, and the silent acquiescence of the enslaved community formed a tapestry of domination, a system where fear and secrecy governed reality. And yet within this darkness there is understanding. Knowledge is power, and seeing the mechanisms of manipulation, even as a child, awakens a consciousness that cannot be unlearned. The plantation, a microcosm of human hierarchy, exploitation, and deception, stands as a warning that those who wield power will shape reality to their desires, that the innocent can be coerced, silenced, and hidden, and that the consequences of these hidden truths ripple across generations. For William, the revelation became a foundation, a grim initiation into the realities of control. And for you, the observer, it is the same. The forbidden knowledge of human manipulation, once glimpsed, changes the way you perceive the world and your place within it forever.